In this video, I'm going to go over the 3 key events that need to happen for a $200,000 Bitcoin and my personal prediction on when I think that this will actually happen. So I'm going to break down these 3 key triggers that need to happen for a $200,000 Bitcoin, and then also at the end of the video, guys, I'm going to give you the 1 key trigger that could potentially lead to a $500,000 Bitcoin and when I think that this will happen too. And I actually made another YouTube video about 8 months ago on my other channel saying that Bitcoin would hit $100,000 and when that would happen, and I was basically correct in my prediction within like a month of it actually happening. So I'm going to see if this video that I make of Bitcoin hitting $200,000 will be as accurate as my other video. So let's get right into it, guys. I'm going to break down these 3 triggers or 3 key events that we're going to need for a $200,000 Bitcoin when it's going to happen. So the first event is going to be retail interest to return. So obviously back in like November, December of 2024, retail interest was very high. And you could tell this from a few different types of indicators. So one, you can look at the Bitcoin Google search, which I'll show you guys right now. So all you have to do is go on Google and type in the Bitcoin Google trends, and you're going to see that this is the interest over time of Bitcoin. And you can see that right now we are only around 20 for this search volume or interest over time. And if we go back to when I was saying before, around like November, December, we could see that the search volume was really high here, like almost like 70. So we could see that the interest in Bitcoin right now is super low. So we're going to have to get back to that at least over 50 or around that 70 mark. Then look, you can see right here, the week was November 10th to 16. So this is one thing that you guys can keep a track of. So we're going to need this interest back in Bitcoin. The other indicator that you guys can use to track this is the CoinMarketCap Bitcoin Altcoin Index. So if you just go over to CoinMarketCap, so I'm on CoinMarketCap right now, and you can see that it's going to tell me if it's Bitcoin season or altcoin season. So basically right now we're kind of in Bitcoin season, so that's getting most of the share volume, but all the actual major gains in altcoins would happen when it's altcoin season. So as long as we are in Bitcoin season right now, that's a pretty good indication. Once this goes over to altcoins, that's going to tell you that interest is kind of moving over to the altcoins like Ethereum, Cardano, XRP, and all those other coins. So that's when you could probably see the Bitcoin dominance and Bitcoin start to tail off. And we probably kind of going to hit a little cap at Bitcoin for the moment. So as long as we're in Bitcoin season, we know that it's still going to be trending higher. Another good indicator here is the fear and greed index. If I zoom in on it right now, it tells you about the overall fear in the market is kind of neutral around 54. If this gets to 80, 90, which would be extreme greed, that's going to tell you that we could be potentially heading into a local topping as well, especially if when it goes to extreme greed and it goes to altcoin season, that's going to tell you that Bitcoin might be cooling off a little bit. And then the other indicator of retail interest is literally when you hear friends, family, your aunt, your uncle talking about Bitcoin. And I actually noticed this around December when a lot of people started talking about Bitcoin. So just be careful when it gets to this point. Bitcoin could have a little bump up further, but to be honest, we're probably getting close to a local top. And the next event is that we need the FOMC to cut interest rates. So when is this going to happen and how will it happen? So the first thing is that Jerome Powell needs to resign or get fired. And I'm going to guys show you a tweet about this for those of you that have no clue what I'm talking about. So first you need to understand that lower interest rates will stimulate economic growth, and Trump knows this and he wants to stimulate the economy and the stock market. So as you can see in this tweet right here, Trump really wants lower interest rates. Why? Because it's going to stimulate economic growth, which I just told you guys. And Jerome Powell does not want to do this. So he wants Powell out as the Fed chairman and wants to put someone in that will actually listen to Trump and will lower the interest rates. And if you go on crypto Twitter or just in the news in general, it's basically just Trump just getting on Jerome Powell, just saying how much he hates him and wants him out of the Fed chairman position. And we do think that a new Fed chairman could take place sometime this year, maybe in the next few months, to be honest, or in the next month or so. If Jerome Powell doesn't cut interest rates on the July 30th FOMC meeting, which happens later this month, right, then you can see that Trump's going to be even more upset and we could probably see Jerome Powell out of this position. So just getting a new Fed chairman is bullish for Bitcoin overall, especially if interest rates get cut along that. Even you can see right here, Trump on Jerome Powell. We have a moron at the head of the Fed. He's a moron. So Trump hates him. Everyone that's looking for this economic growth in stocks and crypto also hates him. So a bullish sign for Bitcoin right now is going to be if Powell resigns or gets fired and interest rates get cut. And there are a few other catalysts here as well, like CPI or unemployment rates rising, because if that happens, then we're going to have to lower interest rates. But recently they've actually been going down. Or if stocks crash, the Fed usually lowers interest rate to simulate economic growth. However, even when stocks crash with all the tariff news, Jerome Powell still wouldn't cut interest rates, which is why Trump hates him. He wouldn't even cut rates when we were supposed to cut rates when stocks were going down, although they did come back up without cutting rates. But anyway, this is some other things that could happen, but the main bullish thing here, guys, is that we need interest rates to get cut or Jerome Powell to resign or get fired. And the third trigger or event, which is the most important in my opinion, is that the M2 Global Liquidity Index needs to show a $200,000 Bitcoin with a 10 to 12 week lag behind. And I'm going to show you guys what I'm talking about right now. So this is probably the most important thing that I'm going to show you guys right now. And the red and green candles is the Bitcoin chart, which we can see right now is at $109,000. And this black line is the M2 Global Liquidity Index, which basically shows the amount of cash flowing in the entire world. And what we could see is that since the Bitcoin got approved for the ETFs back in January of 2024, so about a year and a half ago, Bitcoin has been lagging behind the global liquidity index about 10 to 12 weeks. So right now I'm on a 10-week delay here, but we could see that Bitcoin on the 10-week delay is literally tracking the global liquidity index, which shows that when more money is being printed and pushed into the pockets of the banks and everyone around the world, even retail people, okay, there's about a 10-week lag, or which is basically like a 2.5-month delay of when that money eventually flows into Bitcoin. Because first it's going to go into like real estate, safer assets, and then maybe into the stock market. And then after the stock market, like about 10, 12 weeks, 2-3 months, it'll flow into more riskier assets such as Bitcoin. So it kind of just goes down the curve. And what we could see is that in the next 2.5 months, or what has happened in the past 2.5 months for the M2 Global Liquidity Index, right, because it's on a 10-week lag, is that countries around the world are printing money, and the global liquidity of how much cash is flowing right now is just skyrocketing, which is basically happening because a lot of other countries are just printing loads of money. So how is the US going to start printing money? It needs to lower interest rates. So when the US starts lowering interest rates, they lower interest rates by injecting money into the banks, which then have more money to give loans out to other people, therefore putting more money into people's pockets. Once we see the US government start to cut interest rates, this is going to be that this black line here is going to skyrocket. And let's take a look at where it's at right now. Right now, basically in the next 2.5 months, this is predicting that Bitcoin is going to be around $150,000. This is wild, guys. And you could see how clearly and closely Bitcoin has been following it since it got approved for the ETFs. And we even have an Ethereum ETF, a Solana potential ETF, which I actually think might have gotten approved or is about to get approved like this week or next week. So a lot of crypto is becoming more safer day by day. Obviously, crypto is super risky, but when it gets an ETF, that just kind of proves that it's becoming more of a valued asset. So this indicator, guys, is the most important one that you need to be tracking. And listen, it's not perfect, but this has been accurate about 80 to 90%, because right now Bitcoin is lagging a little bit behind the M2 Global Liquidity Index. And honestly, this is because of the wars going on, and a lot of the wars kind of put a big pause on Bitcoin and assets overall. But Bitcoin is right behind the S&P 500 and a lot of major stocks as they're about to hit all-time highs. Bitcoin is just on the cusp of hitting all-time highs too. So time will tell if Bitcoin will continue doing what it did the past year and a half and follow the M2 Global Liquidity Index. So, of course, after giving you guys these 3 key triggers, well, what is my prediction? And it is going to be that probably sometime in 2026, I'm thinking probably Q1 or Q2 of 2026, we'll see a $200,000 Bitcoin. Now, like I said, it depends on all these events. This could happen sooner if interest rates just start getting cut, Jerome Powell gets fired, and you see the M2 Global Liquidity Index just starts skyrocketing because the US is printing money. It could be even quicker. It could be Q4 of this year, but we don't know. And the same thing, like let's say Jerome Powell stays as the Fed chairman for like another year or two and just doesn't cut interest rates. Well, 2026, this could be pushed back to like 2027 potentially. So these 3 key events, we gotta wait to see. But my personal prediction on what could happen based on these events right now and speculation, probably Q1, Q2 of 2026. So we could have like another year until we see this based on these events. But now I'm going to give you guys my $500,000 Bitcoin. So as you can see in yellow right here, the major thing that everyone wants to happen, the most bullish thing for all assets, especially crypto, is for the government and the Federal Reserve to start quantitative easing, which is basically where it's going to be printing a ton of money, more money that we could ever imagine, especially right now in 2025, 2026. But anyway, I'm going to talk about first, well, what happens if we don't enter quantitative easing and we don't get down to that, 0 to 1% interest rate, and we don't do that. If we don't do that, then honestly, a $500,000 Bitcoin, guys, we're going to have to wait for the next Bitcoin halving and maybe do a quantitative easing down the line. And next Bitcoin halving is going to be April 2028. So probably that cycle, a $500,000 Bitcoin could be like 5 to 10 years, in my opinion. I do think that the run up would start around, it's usually like a year after the Bitcoin halving. So maybe April 2029, 2030. So if we don't do quantitative easing, it's going to be a while. You're going to have to be very, very patient. So now the question is, what if we do start quantitative easing this year or in 2026? Well, first, for that to happen, interest rates have to be like 0. It have to go to ZERP or be like below 1%, very low. And well, the good thing about this is that if Powell does get fired or resigns, the person that Trump wants to get in, Bessent, in a recent interview, Bessent stated that he wants to return what we had pre-COVID, which is 1 to 2% interest rates. And if you don't know, during COVID, we entered quantitative easing back in 2020, 2021. So to get back to that point, interest rates got to go back to 1, 2% or lower than 1%, which could happen if Trump gets Powell fired in the next few months and gets Bessent in, and he could start lowering interest rates. We could be at 1% interest rates in 1 year from now, literally. So to go back to my thesis, let's say 1 year from now, which would be Q3 of 2026, we enter quantitative easing. And at that point, I think Bitcoin would already be past $200,000. So I do think that maybe once we start quantitative easing, the Fed's going to inject $1 to $2 trillion of liquidity into the banks, which would go into the pockets of everyone. And like I said, that's just more cash flowing around. We're going to see that global liquidity index that I showed you guys, that chart, that black line is going to go straight up if we enter QE, quantitative easing, for short. And I do think that if we start QE in Q3 or Q4 of 2026, it may only take 1 to 2 years to hit a $500,000 Bitcoin. So if we hit quantitative easing, which is started by the Federal Reserve, in about 1 year from now, and then I do think 1 to 2 years after that, we will see a $500,000 Bitcoin potentially before the next Bitcoin halving. Now, this is big speculation here. This is if we start quantitative easing, and even with quantitative easing, guys, Bitcoin may only get to like $300,000-$400,000 and then kind of drop down before the next Bitcoin halving. So I think the earliest case possible, this is very, very speculative, with quantitative easing, we print loads of money. Bitcoin by 2027, 2028 could hit 500K. If not, even with quantitative easing, I think the more likely outcome here is that we're going to get a 1 cycle delay, and that we're going to have to wait for the next Bitcoin halving 2028, and then probably sometime in the next cycle, in probably like 5+ years, we could see a $500,000 Bitcoin potentially. So this is my prediction, guys. Thank you guys for watching. Like I said, just to sum it up, my prediction, as long as we get a new Fed chairman, we start cutting interest rates and potentially start QE, I'm thinking at probably around Q1, most likely Q2 or even Q3 of 2026, we'll see a $200,000 Bitcoin. But anyway, guys, please, in a link in the description of this video, join my free Discord. I give market analysis on there daily. I'm always on there. So if you have questions, you guys could just go join that and ask me anything you want. I'm probably going to cap it at 100 people. We're getting very close to that point. So make sure you guys go join now. Also, guys, please like the video, comment if you have any questions, subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be making a lot more videos, kind of like the style, breaking down and explaining things more thoroughly. But that's it for today's video. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one.